Hey, welcome back to another Type 5 how-to. Today we're going to be taking a look at how to completely set up a hot tub from scratch using bromine. Now, this hot tub water looks pretty clear, but it's starting to get a little bit old and stale, and it's taking a lot more chemicals than normal to maintain it. You'll also notice that the alkalinity and pH on my test strip over here is starting to separate and get away from each other. So I know that I really need to change this water. Now, you really should be changing the water in your hot tub every 3 to 4 months, because over time you'll get body oils, lotions, and different things trapped inside of the jets of your hot tub. And you really need to clean that out so that your filters and all your chemicals will work efficiently. So let's go ahead and get this hot tub drained, and I'll take you step by step through the process of how I set this up from scratch.
Before you drain the water in your hot tub, you'll want to use a product that'll clean all the biofilm from the internal plumbing. I recommend this product called Ahh-Some. Start by placing the jets on hold so you can remove the filters. Now would also be a great time to clean your filters, so make sure you're subscribed to the channel so you don't miss out on my follow-up video on how to deep clean your hot tub filters. This Twilight 8.25 hot tub from Master Spas will hold a little over 500 gallons when full, so I'm adding about half of the Ahh-Some container to clean out the jets. Make sure before you begin to check that all of the jets are open, and then run all the jets for at least 15 to 20 minutes. Here you can see that I made sure to go around and put all the diverter valves in the center so that the water would flow through all the jets during the cleaning process. You'll know that the product is working since the hot tub will start to foam. Just scrape off the excess foam as you can before moving on to the next step.
After running the jets for about 20 minutes with the hot tub cleaner, you can see that it leaves this yellow, nasty film around the whole edge of the hot tub. I'm going to go ahead and clean that up after I've drained the hot tub, which is the next step. Now, some hot tubs you have to take the cover off in order to get to the drain plug and let it drain out. I found that it's a whole lot faster to pick up a submersible utility pump. This one here is about 1/3 horsepower. It will completely drain my hot tub in about 15 minutes. I've attached an 1.25" check valve to it with about 75 feet of hose so that I'm not draining onto the nice yard, but instead I'm draining all this water to the back corner. So we'll go ahead and get this set up. Just make sure that you lower the sump pump into the hot tub before you plug it in so that you're not running the pump dry.
Once the pump is done, I like to use a wet dry vac to remove any remaining dirty water. Then to clean the tub, I just use clean water and a magic eraser. I try to avoid soaps because I don't want any soap to be left over when I fill the tub back up. Just make sure that you're really careful getting in and out of the hot tub since it's really slick when it's just been emptied. Ask me how I know.
All right, now that the hot tub's cleaned out, it's time to fill it back up. I'm going to be using my hose to do this, as you don't really want to use softened water. That could damage the plumbing. So I've included this hose filter to keep a lot of the junk out of my well water from getting into my hot tub. Now, when you do this for the first time, you want to let that run just for a couple seconds to get all the initial particles out, and then let it fill through where the filters are so that you can get out any of that trapped air from the plumbing. So I'm going to let this fill up. It might take a couple hours. We'll continually come back to check on it, make sure that it's doing okay, and then we can start on the chemicals. Well, we filled it back up, but it's yellow. Don't worry, that is normal for well water. That's just iron that we're going to have to filter out. But before we turn on the hot tub, you want to make sure that your filters are back in. Make sure that they're in the right locations while the hot tub is filling up. So now that we got the filters in, you want to turn the power back onto the hot tub and let it warm up, and then we'll get to address the iron that's in the water. When you power the hot tub back on after it's been off for a while, it's going to ask you to go through a startup process and prime the pumps. So just let these run for a couple seconds each, and that'll get all of the air out of the system, and then we can focus on the chemicals. You'll also want to make sure that your time setting is correct and that you're letting the schedule for the filters run twice a day, probably 3 to 4 hours each. Now that it's full, it's going to take all night to get back up to temperature, but no one wants to go in a yellow hot tub. So the first thing that we're going to do is add this entire bottle of Metal Gone. It will make all of those iron particles stick together so that the filter can actually filter it out. And then tomorrow when we come out here, this hot tub should be nice and clear, but we'll have to rinse off all that iron out of the hot tub filters, and then we can move on to the next steps. Well, it's the next day and we're up to temperature. It's still a little bit yellow, but as you can see, I've taken the filters out and sprayed off this one just for a comparison. It's doing a good job at collecting the iron. We'll continue to take these out and spray them off the next day or two to make sure that we've gotten all the iron out. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and get these chemicals ready so we can start using the hot tub. Now, I like setting up my hot tub with bromine because the sanitizer lasts longer in the hot water than straight chlorine. To do that, I'm going to establish a bromine base by using some of this powdered sodium bromide. It says to use 1/2 ounce for every 100 gallons. My hot tub is about 500 gallons, so I'll need about 2.5 ounces, which is right around 1.5 capfuls. Here, you can measure it out or just add in about 1.5 caps. And then if you were to try to use these test strips to test for the bromine, you'll actually notice, even after we add it, that it doesn't show up on the test strip. That's because the bromine by itself is not a sanitizer. It needs a sanitizer to activate it. Now, you could use either non-chlorinated shock or chlorinated shock to activate the bromine and get it to cling to the contaminants. I prefer to use chlorinated shock because it keeps the water nice and clear. I found that the non-chlorinated shock makes it a little bit cloudy. So I just have straight chlorine granules. I'm going to add a little bit of this, just a small amount, to activate the bromine. One thing that you want to note, when chlorine and bromine come together, they activate, but they almost neutralize each other. So you don't want to add in a ton of chlorine. That would completely cancel out all of your bromine base. But we're going to add a little bit of shock to activate it. And then anytime we have a lot of people using the hot tub, I might add a little bit of this chlorine shock just to activate the bromine again. And we'll add some bromine tabs in a floater to maintain this bromine levels and keep our hot tub nice and clear. Now, before I shock the hot tub with a little bit of chlorine, I want to make sure that my pH and alkalinity levels are correct. So I've tested it with these test strips, and I can see that both the alkalinity and pH are on the very high end. Now, I like using this spa up and spa down from Leisure Time because it changes both the alkalinity and pH at the same time. Since I need both of those values to decrease, I can add a capful of spa down to drop a shade at a time. So since I'm 2 shades high, I'm going to add 2 caps, let that run for 15 minutes or so. Then we'll retest and add more if needed until I get to that okay range. Those 2 capfuls of spa down was all that was needed to bring us down into the proper alkalinity and pH range. Now I want to activate that bromine by using a little bit of this chlorine shock. You'll notice that I'm not even using 1/2 cap to activate this. This entire large bottle will last you a really long time for your shock. When you add this in, if there's a lot of contaminants, you may notice that the water might turn a little bit slightly brown or a different color. That's fine, it'll get filtered out. I'll let this run again for another 15 minutes, and then we'll check and reevaluate where we're at. Now, before we finish off with some maintenance steps, the last thing that I need to add to start up this hot tub is going to be some hardener. Naturally, my water is a little bit soft. It's about at 100 parts per million right now. And I found that I end up needing to add pretty much this entire bottle of calcium hardness increaser to get the hardness level in the acceptable range. That'll keep the plumbing and the pumps and everything working properly over the use of the hot tub. Now that all the initial setup is done, I want to talk a little bit about maintaining the hot tub on a weekly basis. To start here, you're going to want to use some form of bromine tabs in a floater. Now there are two main types of floaters that you might find on Amazon. The cheaper one here is a little basket where you can put in multiple tabs versus this tube style. Now out of the two, I really recommend spending a couple extra dollars and getting this tube style. The reason being is when you put 3 or 4 tablets in this type of floater, the water hits all of those tablets at the same time, and you can get bromine levels that tend to spike and then drop down as the tablets dissolve, and it's a little bit more maintenance. If you get one of these tube styles, you fill up the entire tube with bromine tablets, and then you could set the amount of opening to only show how much tabs that you want exposed so that it's actually touching the water. So as these dissolves, the fresh tablets will keep dropping down. I have mine set a little bit above this halfway mark here and have found that that does a pretty good job. We may need to adjust that, increase or decrease that opening if you're having bromine levels that are too high or too low. These 1-inch tablets actually have a little bit of bromine and chlorine mixed together, so they'll stay activated as they float around in the water, which is great. And then to finish it off, I really like using a little bit of Bright and Clear about once a week. Now this product helps to have the filter pick up a lot of those particles. It does a decent job of grouping together some of the body oils and detergents and things from generally using the hot tub. When you use this Bright and Clear, it will create a little bit of foam on the top that you can then scrape off with a skimmer, and then use a magic eraser to wipe down that ring that might form, and it'll keep the water looking really, really clear. I found that when I use Bright and Clear once a week, that I don't end up having a lot of foam. I don't have to use a defoamer all of the time. It keeps those foam levels down, and you'll notice the difference between general bubbles versus actual foam when you're using the hot tub over time. So that'll pretty much do it for this video. Hope you've all learned something. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, make sure to do so, and I'll see you all on the next project. Oh.